Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to talk about the 1977 film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This film came out in November of 77, months after Star Wars, but clearly 77 was a landmark year for the genre with two huge blockbusters in the science fiction genre. This film was written and directed by Steven Spielberg, and it starred Richard Dreyfuss and Francois Truffaut and Terry Garr and Melinda Dillon, just Carrie Guffey, who played the child Barry. So, a very famous cast from this movie. First, I'll talk a little bit about the origins of the movie. So, Steven Spielberg, coming off of Jaws, which came out a few years before in '75, which was a massive hit, was given the green light to make his UFO movie Close Encounters, which he had actually been working on before Jaws, been working on the script, and actually as a teenager had made a film called Firelight in the mid '60s, which is not available to the public. I think there's some very short clips available of the film he made as a teenager, but many view that as an early draft of Close Encounters. And Spielberg has told the story many times. When he was a kid, his dad took him to watch a meteor shower, and that left a big impact on his imagination growing up. And so this is a really, even though it's a blockbuster, it's a really personal film for Steven Spielberg that he was able to make. It was released by Columbia. Very expensive production, a very long production, Close Encounters, I'll talk about the film's legacy a little bit, I think, towards the end, but it was a long production to get this film made. I know Spielberg's name is on the script, and he was the primary driving force on the script, but there were others who worked on the script through the years, and it went through different iterations. I know the original story, it was going to be much more of a kind of a paranoid thriller type movie about government cover-ups and UFO encounters. It was going to be more of a thriller. Of course, this movie isn't a thriller, it's more into the fantastical genre, and it was in some ways a game changer for science fiction because it was a movie where the aliens are not hostile. At least so we're led to believe as we watch the film. So it was different in that sense. Just touch upon briefly on the story of the film. So the film is structured. We start out the film in a desert in Mexico where a bunch of missing planes from the Second World War have shown up, and at this strange location, and the locals speak of seeing bright lights and lights in the sky and things like that. And also the opening scene sets up the theme of communication, which is a big theme in the film, where we have Lacombe, played by Francois Truffaut, speaks French throughout the film, and Bob Balaban plays his translator. So you have a local speaking Spanish, and Balaban translating the Spanish in French to Truffaut. So there is that theme of language barriers in the very mysterious first scene, and then we go to an air tower in Indianapolis, I believe, where there's UFOs reported on the radar. Another suspenseful scene, and then we go into other parts of Indiana. We meet Melinda Dillon's character, who is a single mom, and her young child seems to be influenced by the UFOs. And then we go to the Neary family with Richard Dreyfuss and Terry Garr, who are having a typical night in their suburban home. of course, another big Spielberg theme of suburbia, and I love the set of their house and how kind of cramped and almost claustrophobic it is. It's packed with so much stuff, which I always like that touch. And Roy Neary, the protagonist, he's an electrician. He works at an electric company, but he's get the sense his mind is elsewhere. He's not. He's maybe unfulfilled by his family responsibilities, and it's hinted that there's a restlessness in the household. And when there's a big power outage that night due to the UFOs, Roy goes out and has a close encounter of his own, as they say, and with very famous scene in his truck. And after that happens, he is changed forever, where he feels this almost like this psychic drive within him to pursue the mystery of what he encountered and what it all means, which leads to the breakup of his family, another Spielberg theme of families breaking up, and convinces him to go out, and he has visions, and eventually we learn these visions are of Devil's Tower in Wyoming, and feels he must go there to for reasons he cannot even really fathom himself, but he's driven to go there. He's joined by Melinda Dillon, who wants to find her son, who was also taken away by the aliens in a kind of a thrilling scene, or kind of a almost frightening scene when Barry is abducted, and that scene. And of course, once they arrive in Wyoming, that story about the government cover up is still in the movie, although it's more benevolent. It's more of a benevolent cover up, and there's this story about a anthrax outbreak in Wyoming, and they have to clear out all the people, but it's just because the government knows that this is where the landing is going to take place, okay, near Devil's Tower, and and there is a subplot as well following the government operatives as they are trying to unravel the mystery of these UFOs, which is very much part of modern mythology of the government, which did investigate UFOs and things like that. J. Allen Hynek, who was one of the lead government scientists investigating UFOs, makes a cameo appearance in the film as well. But of course, it all leads to this, huge light show climax at Devil's Tower, where the crafts land and the characters meet their fate, I guess you might say. Yeah, a lot to unravel in this film. I think one thing to start with, I know the fact that Roy Neary leaves his family, I know has been a big point of contention in this movie. Even Spielberg himself has said he would not include that in the story now, have a father leave his family. So there's that, and I think it's interesting. I think in some ways it speaks to the Roy Neary character just being someone who had a family but wasn't really emotionally mature, maybe to shoulder the responsibilities of having a family. I think is a big theme there. So there's definitely that. There's so many other ideas in this movie. I think about, the UFO phenomenon is really hitting a fever pitch in the 1970s, which had been building up since the 50s, 60s, into the 70s. This was very much in the cultural zeitgeist of the time. Spielberg and many others were captivated by the mysteries of UFOs, and were they real, were they imagined, and all that type of thing, that great mystery. And UFOs are still in the conversation today. It's a bit different today, but it's still there. So I think as far as the performances in the film, Dreyfuss, coming off of Jaws, worked again with Spielberg, and I think Dreyfuss gives a good performance here as an everyman, as this, everyday person who gets called to something he never expected to be called to, and deals with it. I mean, or is he? We wonder, is he under some kind of delusion? Is he having some kind of breakdown? Which he is, but through no fault of his own. It's out of his control somewhat, and I think Dreyfuss brings a little bit of humor to the role, and he brings. I think I know people have different reactions to Dreyfuss' performance. I don't know if it's aged as well. I know people have issues with the character and the performance, but for me, I always thought it hit all the right notes. The character. I like Francois Truffaut as the French UFO investigator is great. He just exudes humanism on screen, and he's of course a legendary French filmmaker in his own right, of the French New Wave, and I think he was ideally cast. And Terry Garr is really good as Roy Neary's wife, and she's in a difficult place. She just wants to live a normal life, and is gets caught up in her husband's manias that really aren't his faults, but nevertheless, I think we can at least emphasize a little bit with her dilemma that she's in, and how she reacts to it. So yeah, and I'm trying to remember, character's name, Ronnie Neary, Terry Garr plays, and the kids are good in the film. The kids are well cast in their scenes, and Bob Balaban as the translator is really good in the film. He and Truffaut make kind of a duo throughout the film, and there's just a lot of little parts as well, bit parts or faces. There's a lot of like non-speaking roles in the film where we know the faces, but we never really get to know the characters, I think, which is used effectively as well here. But I think really going for that sense of wonder that the film manages to really accomplish, and does a great job of doing. Of course, the special effects were a big part of this movie. Douglas Trumbull, who huge special effects person at this time, helped with the effects and the look of the spaceships and all those things, especially for that climactic scene at the landing, which took a long time to film, took a long time to get the special effects and all that. So that's works well. And a lot of the movie, part of the movie was filmed in Wyoming for the stuff happening around Devil's Tower, and then a lot was filmed in Mobile, Alabama, specifically in a huge abandoned airport hangar, I believe, which was a gigantic building, and was served as the set for the landing of sequence at the end as well. So, and portions were also filmed in Mexico and India as well. So there is, I like about it too, there is a global, kind of a global approach to making the film. And it should definitely talk about the music as well. Another fantastic score from John Williams. I think the score for this movie really goes with evoking that sense of wonder and mystery. The music can be ominous at times. It can be exciting and very exciting at times. It can just kind of almost have a religious component to it at times as well. And there is definitely a lot of religious iconography in this movie. Reading Roy's story as like a biblical character. 10 Commandments is referenced early in the film, and we can see the biblical parallels with the character if you want to interpret it along those lines as well. And that's definitely in the movie, and also there a lot of like the New Age influence of the 70s is in this movie as well, especially with the ending and the idea of life elsewhere, extraterrestrials elsewhere, coming to bring a sort of a new transcendence, a new understanding, kind of lifting humanity up to a newer level, spiritual level, you might say. 2001 did that in a very abstract kind of intellectual way, but Spielberg does it in a very or not in a very emotional way, and that's an interesting difference between Spielberg and Kubrick in the making of this film. And there's just so many interesting scenes, the sound design, like the part with Roy in the truck when he's being visited, and I think the music as well, the famous five notes, is such a big part of this movie, and how that's a motif throughout the film. Just like you have the two notes in Jaws, you had the five notes in Close Encounters, which is a great motif through the film, and just the use of color that we get throughout the movie as well, and all that. So it's maybe my favorite science fiction movie, actually, and I know and it's interesting now because we're kind of in the summer of Jaws is having a renaissance, and when I record this in the summer of 2025, it's the 50th anniversary of Jaws, and there's been it's going to be released again, and there's been documentaries and a lot of articles and think pieces about the legacy of Jaws, and a lot of articles are talking about Jaws being Spielberg's greatest film, and I don't know, I'd say it's his best film, but it's definitely up there. It's a very important movie, but it'll be curious to see if 2 years from now, if Close Encounters gets the same attention as Jaws. I think Jaws is a little bit more well known in the culture, a little bit more beloved. I think just because of the story, Jaws is such a primal story that people can relate to, even though it's such a 70s movie. The story is relatable. Whereas Close Encounters, I don't know, because I think it's also very 70s, and I think modern audiences might find the ending with a big light show to be a little cheesy, or like, as I've said, I know I've shown this film to students, and Dreyfuss's performance often strikes them as being a little off, and things like that. So Close Encounters, it's such a product of the 70s. I'm not sure how it plays out, and the whole kind of post-60s new age, we're going to become, lifted spiritually and all these things. I just don't know how that message hits today. But I don't know. It'll be curious to see how Close Encounters is remembered in a couple years from now. Yeah, and I think the legacy of this film, I mentioned earlier, like the UFO phenomenon is still a thing, and it's although they're not called UFOs anymore, are they? I'm trying to think of the term that is used now. Is it? Yeah, I always forget that, but. Yeah, sorry for the pause here. Yeah, UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomena. So UAPs, I guess, is the term used today. And a few years ago, it was in the news about balloons in the sky, or some footage from the Air Force or from pilots, and they couldn't explain, and there were hearings and things like that. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like we've kind of moved past that X-Files, Close Encounters era of thinking about UFO conspiracies and things like that. So that could date this movie a little bit as well. But who knows? Who knows? It could come back into fashion. We'll just wait and see. So anyway, just a few books. There are some excellent books written about Close Encounters. This is a really detailed book on the making of the film by Ray Morton. This is just Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the making of Steven Spielberg's classic film, and there's photographs in here, and just a really detailed recounting of the production, a lot of great stories and things like that in this book. Yeah, so And then I have another. This is more of a coffee table book, I guess you might say. Came out in 2017 for the 40th anniversary. This is just like a lot of an account of the making of the film and a lot of photographs, and includes photographs from the film, from the production. We also have, like, this is from the script, and we can see actually revisions and notes made on the script of the film as it was being made and written. So another detailed account of the making of the film, and I think Steven Spielberg wrote the foreword for this. Yeah, let's see. Just a bit of what Spielberg wrote. A film about our civilization's first contact with an extraterrestrial race presented huge challenges, not only to me as its writer-director, but to all of us behind the production. One of the biggest. Where exactly would the final close encounter take place? We had spent months searching for a site that was intended to be at the base of a geological landmark when our production designer, Joe Alvis, found Devil's Tower in Wyoming. Yes. 40 years later, Close Encounters remains one of my most personal films. It's one of a very few movies that I not only directed but wrote. When I started the script in 1973, I was still in my mid-20s and hadn't yet directed my first feature. The very first scene I wrote was the very last in the movie. So, yes, Spielberg obviously remembers this movie very fondly. And, and it was a big success in 1977 as well. It was a successful movie that only further bolstered Spielberg's rise in Hollywood and into the 1980s. So those are my thoughts on Close Encounters. I'm curious if how you feel about the film, if you have any memories or thoughts on Close Encounters, or anything to add. I'd be happy to see your comments. So thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye.